Imagine vast armies marching under banners, engineers hauling stone for aqueducts, farmers laboring under tax burdens, and all of it financed not by treasure seized but by promises, debt. From the cradle of civilization to the twilight of empires, credit and obligation were the silent engines of growth and ruin. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join us as we follow the hidden ledger of history, how ancient empires used debt to build, and ultimately destroy, themselves. We often think of debt as a modern phenomenon, banks issuing loans and sovereign bonds. But far earlier, empires leveraged promises of future tribute, labor, and capture to expand their reach. These obligations built roads, walls, temples, armies, yet they also seeded resentment, revolt, collapse. This is a story of ambition, of empire, of obligations that slithered into bondage. We begin in Mesopotamia and the Near East, in the thousands of years before Christ, where debt appeared not just as money owed but as social obligation, personal slavery, and state leverage. Ancient societies used credit to fund wars, to move armies, to bind populations. From there we move to Greece, Rome, Persia, China, and watch the pattern repeat. Build with debt, collapse under debt. What defines an empire built on debt? It is the willingness of rulers to borrow not only gold or silver, but human labor, tribute, and future harvests. It is the transformation of citizens into creditors and debtors. It is the shift of power from farmer to creditor, from soldier to tax collector. Understanding this shift gives us insight into how civilizations grow, and how they rot. At its root, debt in antiquity was more than purely financial, it was moral, social, and political. Terms like debt, guilt, and enslavement intersected. Scholars like David Graeber argue that debt preceded money itself in many societies, making credit the primary medium of social obligation. This framework sets the stage. Borrowing enabled empire, but it also created structural fragility. The very obligations that bound farmers to temples, peasants to states, eventually snapped under pressure. Emperors would spend, wars would rage, labor would be commandeered, and the ledger would tip. That tipping point is our focus. In the earliest agrarian empires, such as in Mesopotamia, farmers borrowed seeds or space in a palace granary. When harvests failed, debt mounted. According to Graeber, debt systems in the ancient Near East linked credit, slavery and warfare in a currency-slavery-warfare complex. In these societies rulers sometimes canceled debts, the so-called clean slate, or jubilee, because if too many farmers fell into debt bondage, food supplies shrank and political order threatened. Debt relief was a shock absorber for empire. Likewise, in ancient Greece we see debt bondage, where citizens unable to repay creditors were forced into servitude. In Athens, the reformer Solon in 594 BC cancelled debts and banned debt slavery in an attempt to preserve civic order. Yet debt also financed expansion. Greek city-states borrowed to wage wars, build navies, erect monuments. The relationship between credit and conquest became symbiotic. But when wars ran out of spoils, debts turned toxic. In Rome the problem grew deeper. The Republican era had limited public debt, but private debts proliferated, and the practice of nexum, whereby debtors pledged themselves into bondage, continued. The law of the 12 tables recognized this condition. As Rome became a conquering empire, it relied on new tribute, slaves, and captured resources to service debt. What began as conquest for glory became finance for survival. The creditor oligarchy grew richer, the small farmers sank further. Meanwhile, in China, imperial courts borrowed from merchants and large landowners, pledging future tax revenue. When revenues fell, farmers were squeezed, land concentrated, rebellion brewed. The cycle replicated. Build with debt, collapse under tax burdens. Empires also monetized slavery. Someone in debt could be enslaved, sold, forced to labor. This turned social inequality into economic bondage. As historian Lisa Eberly notes, Roman laws of usury and bankruptcy reveal how debt was intertwined with death and destruction. One key dynamic: elites preferred pro-creditor laws. In Greece and Rome a debtor's plight became the concern of reformers, but creditor interests prevailed. Historian Michael Hudson argues Western civilization's legal architecture emerged here, favoring creditors over social stability. For example, when Rome fought the Second Punic War, it asked wealthy citizens to lend gold and jewelry. that converted private contributions into public debt and ultimately into land grants for oligarchs. Wealth concentrated, social cohesion decayed. A spreading pattern. Concentration of land in the hands of creditors, collapse of smallholder agriculture, rural depopulation. The empire then turned outward, conquest to fill the internal vacuum. But when conquest slowed, the debt trap snapped, and collapse followed. Empires built roads, aqueducts and temples financed by expectation of tribute and future tax revenue. But when expansion stalled, those obligations remained. The state lacked new spoils, debts piled up, taxes soared, social order unraveled. In Athens, the promise of democracy and equality collided with this financial reality. The farmer who borrowed and lost land could no longer become a hoplite, the citizenry eroded. Debt undermined the very civic foundations. Rome's fall is partially a financial story. As the empire's borders shrank, the tribute funnel reversed, the treasury was empty. Concentrated debt, declining revenue, inflation, debased currency, these combined in a collapse of fiscal legitimacy. In this collapse, the creditor class often emerged intact while the debtor masses lost land, freedom, and voice. The empire transformed into a system of tenant farmers and serfs, a vestige of debt bondage under another guise. The narrative repeats in other civilizations. After expansion, debt burdens rise. When they cannot be serviced, elites extract heavier tribute, agricultural base erodes, revolt and fragmentation follow. Debt becomes the silent destroyer. Some empires attempted relief, cancellation, free land, debt amnesty, but usually temporarily. The underlying structure of growth through debt meant relief delayed the inevitable rather than reversing it. Meanwhile, rulers experimented with creative accounting, recoinage, debasement of currency, forced loans from wealthy citizens. In Syracuse, Dionysius the Elder famously forcibly recalled coins and doubled their face value to clear state obligations. That kind of shortcut built short-term relief but destroyed trust. When citizens and creditors cannot rely on promises, credit collapses. Markets halt, tribute dries up, empire contracts. Debt also spurred internal conflict. In Rome, the conflict of the orders was fueled by debt bondage and land concentration among patricians and creditors. The moral architecture of these societies changed. Debtors lost political voice, creditor elites gained influence, law no longer served community but property rights. This shift undermined the social contract of empire. The most powerful tool in empire building, credit, turned into its Achilles heel. Expansion borrowed from the future. When the future delivered less, the structure collapsed inward. Today's global debt levels may echo these ancient patterns. Growth financed by future obligations, inequality rising, expansion slowing. The ancient lesson resonates: build wisely, or pay dearly. We close with that moral. Debt is not just financial, it is political, social, moral. Empires built on promises must honor them, or risk collapse. If you've enjoyed this journey into the hidden ledger of human history, like and subscribe, share widely, and keep your eyes open, because the past still whispers in our present.